Hello everybody, Alexandria Anthony coming at you up close and personal about another subject that I have a huge passion for, ancient Egypt. Hence my latest book, Thoth, As Above, So Below, the greatest alchemist that ever lived. And I can tell you folks, this is the truth. And you must be wondering in your mind, who is Thoth? Well, I can tell you who Thoth is, and I encourage you to buy my book. There's more details, there's facts, there's everything under the sun about Thoth. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about Thoth to whet your appetites about who he was. And really, Thoth was one of the earliest ancient Egyptian gods. He was the god of magic, literature. He was a scribe. He was very influential, and he was actually thought to be self-created, and he was a creator god as well. And actually he was one of the earliest gods, like I said. And there was another legend that said actually he was created from the lips of Ra. And really, again, writing, magic, wisdom, and actually the god of the moon. And he was one of the most important gods. Again, a god of equilibrium, balance. Thoth presided over the judgment of the dead with Osiris, whose souls they judged. When you go into the underworld, they would judge your souls. And it was thought that if there were souls that were very afraid of what they had done in life to be judged, to go over to the other world, that they could call on Thoth in regards to wisdom and getting a pathway into the underworld. And his name was also taken by various kings of Egypt, Tutmosis, born of Thoth. And the worship of Thoth began in Lower Egypt, most likely in the Pre-Dynastic Period, 6000 to 3150 BCE, folks. So that's a very long time. Most commonly, he is depicted as a man with the head of ibis, or a seated baboon, and also with a lunar disc over his head or not. And Hermes was the early major cult center, and this is where the Greeks, we're bringing the Greeks to you now, and the Greeks thought that Thoth was actually Hermes, and Hermopolis was really the center of where the Greeks began to worship Thoth as well. So very interesting there as well. We're going to jump now to Sumeria, and Ningishzidda, generally was thought to be Thoth or Hermes, and he was into alchemy, pyramid building, wisdom. He was a communicator, and he's actually credited with providing Gudea, one of the Sumeria's most enlightened, most known rulers, as a set of divine instructions to make a 7-staged pyramid, folks. And that kind of brings me into another train of thought, and one that I totally believe in, that Thoth was said to know the secrets of the pyramids. So he was said to be a pyramid builder. He did most of the spells in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. When you went to the other world and you were being judged in the halls of judgment with Osiris, Thoth is said to be there. And those again that were quite leery about what they had done in life, again could ask for guidance to Thoth. And then we're jumping to the Greeks, who then thought of Thoth, or their name of Thoth, as Hermes. And again, we touched on Sumeria as well. And what I'm really trying to get at is that Thoth, even though he is an ancient Egyptian god, it is said that after the great times of Egypt faded into the sands of the desert, and maybe they weren't quite as affluent as they were before, that Thoth traveled around to these different civilizations, hence Greek, Sumeria, and then we'll touch on later the Aztecs and South America, Central America as well. So after the decline of the great days of ancient Egypt, Thoth is said to travel around and spread his wisdom. Have you ever pondered the thought, okay, in Egypt they have pyramids that are built a specific way. In Sumeria they had the seven-sided pyramid that Thoth is said to, the serpent god is said to have built. Then we're going to go into the Aztecs and Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl is a serpent god that is said to build or help build the pyramids in Central America, in South America as well. So really what my book is trying to grab at, or trying to entice the readers, or in maybe put a seed in your, a seed of thought or a seed of wisdom in your brain in regards to Thoth having several different names in various different cultures around the world. Again, Thoth in ancient Egypt, Hermes in Greek, and then we touch on the Romans with Mercury, and then as we mentioned in Sumeria, he's actually known as the serpent god, and again in Sumeria he's actually known as a creator god, and again he's a patron god of scribes as well, and very, very interesting in regards to Ningishzidda. And Ningishzidda is actually the Sumerian god, and again very prevalent. And then we're going to jump to Central America, and the Aztecs was with Quetzalcoatl, and Quetzalcoatl is known as the feathered serpent, and he's actually again mentioned, like the Egyptians, a creator deity that contributed essentially to the creation of mankind. And really the first documented mention of Quetzalcoatl is in Teotihuacan in the 1st century BC, or they speculate in the 1st century AD. And the Aztecs, he was the god of wind, air, learning, and again a patron god of the Aztec priesthood. And actually we're jumping again to Hermes Trimegistus, and because of his having 3 parts of wisdom, that's why they called him Hermes Trimegistus, because he had the 3 essential parts of wisdom, and it's the philosophy of the world. And a lot of you may have heard of the term as above, as below, and I know a lot of you in maybe the pagan religions, Wiccan faith, that is something that you use a lot. As above, so below. And Sir Isaac Newton actually touched on that as well. And if you look in my book, there's mention of specifically what that term meant to Sir Isaac Newton and his papers, and where they're situated in Cambridge University as well. And basically, really, knowledge is universal, and what one learns and what one shares is beneficial to us all. And I really, really believe that as well in regards to knowledge is universal. And Thoth, Hermes, may have actually been the first philosopher in really the history of mankind. And I'm only saying that because that was mentioned in ancient Egypt and by the Greeks of Hermes. And it is said that Hermes has made this statement: I made myself a guide to mankind, teaching them the doctrine. And we go into Hermeticism or Hermetic code. A lot of you may have heard of Hermeticism or Hermetic code, and that comes from Hermes, and that's really a religious, philosophical, belief and esoterical tradition that's based on the writings attributed to Hermes. And now when we're talking about the writings of Hermes, I know a lot of you may have heard of the Emerald Tablets, and Thoth is said to be the author of these particular Emerald Tablets, and actually they contain key works or key knowledge from the beginning of time in regards to creation, magic, alchemy. And let's face it, folks, if you're not familiar with the term alchemy is. Alchemy is really the transformation of one chemical, one specific thing into something other. So that's really what magic does too. And Thoth was really a master at changing one form into another. And what I mean by that is changing one form into another. We're going to backtrack where Thoth then became Hermes, Thoth then became Mercury, and Thoth became the god, the serpent god in Sumeria, and Thoth became the serpent or the feathered one in the Aztec culture. So that really explains the title, the greatest alchemist that ever lived, because truly through all these different civilizations, it boils down to one god, Thoth. And Thoth is said to have the teachings of the creation and all that. Again, he was a master pyramid builder, so of course he was in tune with building the pyramids in Egypt. We did mention the seven-sided pyramid in Sumeria, and then again we jump into the pyramids of Central and South America with the Mayas, the Aztecs, and all that too. And of course we come into modern times when we mention Hermetic code, Hermeticism, in regards to esoterical religious philosophies, in regards to writings that are attributed to Thoth. So really Thoth is an individual that has worn many hats, has had many names through the ages, different civilizations, but it all boils down to the same individual who was, again, in my mind, the greatest alchemist that ever lived. And he must have really had something that was quite important to tell all of us, or he really piqued the interest again of Sir Isaac Newton, who was really a genius in his own time, for him to take the time and as above, so below, and kind of further dissect that. So I really encourage all of you to grab your copy of my latest book, Thoth, As Above, So Below, the greatest alchemist that ever lived. Because really, I think the message that Thoth, Hermes, Quetzalcoatl is trying to tell all of us, that there is secrets in the universe, there is great knowledge out there, and we must seek knowledge. We should share knowledge, and it is out there. And I know a lot of you are probably saying, hey, you forgot to mention Atlantis. And I do mention part of that in my book, in regards to, it is thought that at one point after leaving Egypt, this is a theory, after leaving Egypt, that Thoth did go to Atlantis, and he was one of the supreme beings in regards to, they said, or legend says, that Atlantis, it was superior beings that were living there in regards to philosophy, religion, and they had a lot of secrets of the universe. And again, when Atlantis did sink, Thoth escaped, and at that point there are theories out there that say that Thoth did escape Atlantis, and that's when the timeline, or the point in history, is that Thoth left and then went to Central and South America and was known as Quetzalcoatl. And there is a legend as well in regards to Cortez when he came, and they said that Quetzalcoatl would make his self known, and there would be the beginning of the end. There's a legend in regards to that, and I do mention that in the book. So I ask you again, it would, to purchase the book. It's just packed with so much information. I cover this and so much more, and I even go into, for all of you fans out there, Aleister Crowley did do a Thoth tarot deck. I own the Thoth tarot deck, and it's really based on the theories, the esoterical philosophies in regards to the Hermetic code that Aleister Crowley did cover. So my viewpoint is, there is secret knowledge, there is hidden knowledge, as above, so below, for us to seek And once we are the recipient of this knowledge, it is our responsibility and our duty to share that. And I think it's very important that knowledge is sought and then shared. But I think Thoth really teaches us that through the ages. And the next time maybe you look at an Egyptian pyramid, and then you look at a pyramid, the seven-sided pyramid in a book in Sumeria, and then you look at the pyramids of the Aztecs, Central South America, you may see some similarities in regards to that. And again, Thoth again being a master of words, philosophy, religion, secret knowledge, a scribe. He really was a master of a lot of things. And if you purchase my book, there's even a mention of Abraham in the Bible as well, and his wife Sarah. I'm not going to spoil it, but it is said that his wife Sarah, and this is just a legend of course, did find Thoth or Hermes asleep in the cave with his emerald tablets, and she was able to grab one. But I won't spoil the rest of the story, because you know, I encourage everybody to pick up a Bible, pick up even the Egyptian Book of the Dead, because the Egyptian Book of the Dead as well has a lot of mention in regards to Thoth. And again, most of the spells are attributed to be written by Thoth. And if you know of the legend of Isis and Osiris, and as you know that Osiris was actually murdered, and then he was poisoned, and then he was cut up into pieces. And the legend is that Thoth helped Isis locate the pieces of her husband's body, Osiris, and was able to give her a magical spell to bring his body pieces together so she could be impregnated, and she was able to give birth to the god Horus. So you can see the correlation as well. So I really encourage you to look more into the name of Thoth, and then again you'll touch on Hermes. And we still use a lot of the symbolism. I know a lot of you are into symbols, and part of my book touches on the symbolism in regards to a staff with two serpents on the side. I'm not going to spoil that as well, that we do use that in everyday language and everyday terminology. So I really thought this would kind of be a beginner sort of an introduction into my book, a book that it's been a long time in the works for me. I've had a fascination in regards to ancient Egyptian religion, philosophy. I mean, we have a lot to learn from the ancients, because they've left so many markers, or actually they've left so many clues for us, and it's up to us to try and uncover these clues and the similarities between different religion, different cultures that seem to, when you sit down and you build a chart, the similarities are just too striking to kind of discount. And I hope that you enjoyed this and you found this interesting, and certainly I invite you to purchase my book, Thoth, As Above, So Below, the Greatest Alchemist That Ever Lived. Thank you very much.